Well, I'm afraid it happens in France. The prices go up and down morning and night, and afternoons. You see them going. You can sit by actually a pricing board outside of a garage and see it change in the day based on fuel prices, wholesale prices. But obviously, the excuse that's usually given by the fuel supply chain is that obviously they buy in bulk and they've bought it at one price and they've got to sell it that what's in the bulk off for the price that they actually bought it for, or with a margin. Understandably so. And it's not the retailer's fault. It's the fuel supply chain, the wholesalers and oil companies who are dictating this. And I'm afraid they need to be investigated. And we don't want a cap system. We just want some sort of pump watch system introduced, like we've got for gas, electricity, water and telecoms, some sort of body that gives consumer price transparency, not necessarily protection, transparency.
You make a very good point, actually, in this sense, Howard, that when we look at those latest inflation figures, which were higher than anybody expected, and a very large component of the rise was domestic gas, it was domestic electricity, both, as you say, markets which enjoy a degree of regulatory and governmental oversight. But this seems to be the one glaring exception to that rule. How practically, how would it work? If there was to be a regulator looking at forecourts, would it be sort of, once a year, once a quarter, once a week, once a day? How much regulation would they be doing?
Well, that's a very good point. I had a meeting with the all-party parliamentary group about 2 to 3 years ago with Robert Jenrick when he was MP, when he was Exchequer Secretary. And he said he wasn't in favour of a regulatory body, but he was in favour of a voluntary system, like a kite mark, so that every garage would actually have on its side, we adhere, some kite mark that tells them we adhere to actually fair pricing. When oil price changes or exchange rate changes, we adhere to this process where we give fair pricing to people filling up on the forecourt. That's the sort of thing we'd like to see at the moment to starting off. And I think they would adhere to that. We want garages to make a decent living, a decent profit. There's no way we want to be... I come from a free market situation, even though this government isn't in a free market situation. They're telling us we can't buy diesel and petrol cars in 2030, Colin, as you know. Those are the sorts of things. They're interfering into a market and telling us what modal transport, why they need laws to tell us what modal or electric vehicles we need to drive. I just don't understand. It means they don't believe in the process. But going back to this point here, we do not want a regulator. We want some sort of voluntary system that they would, and I'd like to work with various people like the Petrol Retailers Association, and the RAC has suddenly woken up and said they're calling for scrutiny too. I'm delighted. We've been calling for it since 2013, when we had actually an investigation with the Competition and Market Authority then. I took 10 MPs and stood outside and handed in 110,000 signatures. But that was a whitewash that came out. They said didn't see any abnormal anomalies in the fuel pricing process.
Howard, we've got to leave it there, but you make a very good point about the petrol stations needing to make money. That's one of the problems we had early this year, wasn't it? That we had too few petrol stations, and hence we had one of the reasons we had the problems that we did with the queues, etc.